European adventures on hold for the moment, and we're back to the bread and butter of the URC. My name's Mark. Let's talk rugby. Round 7 of the URC, it's that time of year and we've got derbies galore. So, as usual, what we're going to do is go down through the games that are on this weekend. We'll talk about, how the teams are doing so far in the URC, a little bit about how they did in Europe as well, and then make a prediction for each of the games. So, we're going to start with the Friday night games. We've got two. The first one is Cardiff versus Scarlets. It's a 7:45 kickoff, and it's at Cardiff Arms Park. So, in this one, we have Cardiff second place in the league, Scarlets bottom of the league. So, pretty much as big a gap as you could get between two teams, and obviously the biggest gap that we have between two teams for this round. And yeah, very different fortunes for these teams in the URC. Europe as well. Not great for Scarlets either. But we'll come to that in a second. So we start with Cardiff. So they started out with, first up, a decent win against the Lions. Then, a game that they probably felt like they had chances to win. The loss against Munster at home. They're only lost in the URC so far this season. Then they beat Connacht, Dragons, and Edinburgh, all kind of close games there. And then, a comprehensive win against Zebre before we went into the international break. And then over the European, sorry, give me a second. I have to bring it up here. So over the European period, they were in the Challenge Cup, and, they went, one win, one loss and that. So not terrible, but, I think the main thing for them was it was a really good win last up against Ulster, an informed Ulster team, and there were challenges in getting that win. They had to come back, they had to score a penalty at the end as well to win it. So I think still momentum off the back of that as well coming into this game. Scarlets, on the other hand, had a really bad run at the start of the season, 4 losses on the trot, lost to Munster at home. Then the Stormers, comprehensively to the Stormers at home as well. Then they went to South Africa, I think they lose against the Lions and the Sharks down there, but, not too bad, like 11 and 10 point defeats. And then they get the first win of the season, which was a bit of a shock, honestly, 23 points to nil against, a Glasgow team who were looking to stay in the top 3 or 4 in the league at that stage before the test window, the break for the test window there. But then, they finished 8th last season, so they were in the Champions Cup. And again, I gotta bring this up here. Hang on, give me a sec. There we go. And unfortunately for the Scarlets, a little bit of the whipping boys in their pool. So they've gone 2 games and 2 defeats. They did get a bonus point in one of those, but, and still they have a chance potentially to qualify, because right now they're in 4th and the top 4 qualify, but they do have the Bulls and Pau, breathing down their necks as well in that. So, not a brilliant start to the season for them so far. We're now into kind of the middle third of the season, and, they'd love to get one over, obviously, on Cardiff, especially given the whole thing of, at the minute, it looks like it's going to be either one of either themselves and Ospreys who are the team to get cooked, because Cardiff apparently are safe, and because where the Dragons are geographically, they're probably going to be safe as well. So this would be a great time to send a bit of a message, but I think it's probably going to be a Cardiff win in that one. Now on to the next game then. So it's Leinster versus Ulster. This is also same time, 7:45 kickoff on Friday. It's at the Aviva Stadium. And it feels like bigger derby between these two than we've had in recent seasons, because Leinster on the slide a little bit, Ulster on the way up. So, that gap between them is as close as it's been in years. Obviously, you go back maybe 3 or 4 seasons and Ulster were right up there, on Leinster's coattails and right up, towards the top of the URC. They're starting to get back towards that form. Not quite there, but again, Leinster haven't been great this season. So it's, promising to be a kind of a tight game between these two. And then we have, Leinster, poor start to the season, go to sit down to South Africa, comprehensively beaten by 35 points to nil by the Stormers. Then look a little better against the Bulls, but they lose the lead and the Bulls come over the top of them in the second half. Then get their first win against the Sharks by 26 points. Then that game against Munster that really kind of sent shockwaves through Irish rugby and kind of, started all the questioning of why there's so many Leinster players in the Ireland squad if Munster are taking them apart. Then kind of steadied the ship a bit, a decent win against Zebre, but then they go to the Dragons and they've won by 14 points, but the Dragons had the chance to actually win that game and it could have been very different for them. But to go into Europe then, and, they first of all start out with a win against a Harlequins team, who were pretty, difficult to face, honestly, in terms of the players that they selected for that. It wasn't kind of a straightforward win for them in that one. But to get the win, and then from there they have to go away then, and another tight contest against Leicester this time, losing at half time. But into the second half, 20 minutes to go, they're able to take the lead and then able to kind of stretch out the lead as well there. So not the kind of the easy, pristine, pool stages that we've normally seen for Leinster, but still the 2 wins from 2 in that competition. Ulster then, they've started the season pretty well themselves. Win against the Dragons, comprehensively. Same against the Bulls, both 21-point margins. Then they beat the Sharks after that. A loss against the Lions, down in South Africa, as the Lions kind of hit that little vein of form as well. And then they beat Benetton by 34. So really good start to the season. Then they go into the Challenge Cup, where I'd say that they have ambitions of getting far in that competition. But at the moment, they're 1 win, 1 loss in that competition. And because we're seeing Leinster find a little bit of form, still a lot of work to do, kind of set piece and stuff like that. And their attack definitely needs to be, tuned up a little bit, or a lot, actually, not just a little bit. But I feel like, Leinster might just have the fact that it's a home game for them might just be enough to get them over the line, and they're going to go for a Leinster win in that one. So those are the Friday games. On to Saturday then, we got DHL Stormers versus Lions. So South African derby in that one. And, we have the Stormers who've been perfect all season. They beat Leinster first up. Then Ospreys went away to Scarlets, beat them. Then they beat Zebre, beat Benetton as well, and finished off with a very good win against Munster. That was kind of top of the table clash. Somebody's always got to go, and it was Munster's, because Stormers, produced a great performance in that game, to get themselves the win. Then they go into Europe. And 2 out of 2 in Europe as well. So, completely unbeaten so far this season, and got to be absolutely full of confidence. Lions have been kind of, choppy. Start of the season, poor tour of Europe to start. So start off with defeat against Cardiff, then Zebre, and Benetton after that. Then they got back to South Africa, a couple of home games. They beat the Scarlets, and then they beat Ulster, and then still in South Africa they go to Pretoria and they beat the Bulls, and nice run there. 3 wins on the bounce, and then they are into Europe, and you're thinking, okay, well maybe they're going to produce something in Europe now. But they lose both their games, and they're sitting bottom of their pool at the moment. So, weren't able to bring their domestic momentum into Europe the way that the Stormers did. And because of that, like, the Stormers just seem to be beating all comers at the minute. So I'm going to go for a Stormers win in that one. Okay, on to the next game, and it is Benetton versus Zebre. So it is the Italian derby, 2:00 kickoff, and it's at the Stadio Monigo. And this one, I think it's kind of getting very similar to the Scottish derby, where both teams now can be competitive on their day. And when it comes to derby time, you kind of back the home team. And generally, between these two, I would expect the home team to win, but then Benetton to win kind of on aggregate. And that's kind of similar, I think the Scottish one is on this weekend is very similar. But start of the season so far, Benetton, defeat against Connacht, didn't look great in that game, but then they get a couple of wins. They beat Glasgow, that was a good scalp to take, and then they beat the Lions after that, but then losses against Edinburgh, heavy loss there by 43 points, then they lose against the Stormers, no shame in that, and then they lose against Ulster as well, a heavy loss there, and from there then they go into Europe, and you're thinking, get a bit of confidence back. To do that, to go two wins from 2 in Europe, and a little bit of confidence really coming into this. Zebre started the season brilliantly, back-to-back wins against Edinburgh and the Lions, but then a run of defeats. They lose against Ospreys, the Stormers, Leinster and Cardiff, but that's a tough run. You've got the Stormers in there, top of the league. You got Leinster, who were trying to kind of find their way back and get a bit of form, so kind of wrong time to play them. And then Cardiff second in the league as well, so it was a tough run for them. Then they go into Europe, and they not as good as Benetton in Europe, in the fact that not the performances not quite there for them, but still they get 1 win and 1 loss, so it wasn't, definitely not a disaster, and currently they are in a qualifying place for knockout stages, so that would be good progress, I think, for them. But looking at this game, I think it is going to be a Benetton win, but when they flip around, I'm probably expecting Zebre certainly to have a decent chance of returning the favour. But yeah, I'm going to go for a Benetton win in that one. Okay, so I'm recording this the day after I recorded the rest of the video, because this is now my 3rd recording actually for this video. I made the first recording and I noticed that the audio there was some hum in the back of it that just completely wrecked the audio after recording for about half an hour or whatever. And so then I made the second video, and somehow when I made the second video, I missed out Glasgow versus Edinburgh. So I'm going to put this in here. You're obviously going to notice the lighting is different. But then when we're done with this one, we're going to go back to the original video. So yeah, apologies for that. Let's get on with Glasgow versus Edinburgh. So, this one, Glasgow, fifth place in the league, Edinburgh down at 10th at the minute. And, Glasgow certainly had the better of the starts between these two, but we're used to them being regularly up near the top anyway. Edinburgh, like Connacht, just up and down, like, annoying their fans all the time with, not being able to produce consistent performances. And that's kind of what we've seen from these two teams this year, really. Like, the Warriors did have a blip, but they start out, win against the Sharks, decent win there. Then that loss against Benetton, which really was a bit of a blip because Benetton were very poor in their first game against Connacht. And then, good win against the Dragons, 49 points. Then they beat Ospreys by 25. Then they beat the Bulls by 9. And that was a good, that was a real kind of clash there, because you had those two teams. They were up there, vying to be in that kind of top 3-4 teams. And only one of them was going to get the momentum out of the game. Glasgow got the win, but didn't really get the momentum, because then they go into the next game and they get beaten by Scarlets 23-0. And it's like, what the hell are you doing? And that was a bit of a shock, honestly, that one. Then they go into Europe and they win 2 from 2. And not only that, they produce, for me, the best performance of the first round, or sorry, the first set of pool games in the Champions Cup. Losing 21-0 at halftime against a Toulouse side who must have been thinking, how early can we get the 4th try and get the bonus point, and pretty much how much are they going to win by is what everybody was thinking. Glasgow, though, weren't thinking that. Come out, brilliant performance, get themselves back level. Then, unlike Scotland against the All Blacks, they actually able to go that step further and go on and get the win. That was a brilliant performance, and that's what they're coming into this game on the back of. Edinburgh, by contrast, they've only played 5 games this season, because that game against Ulster was called off, but still not a brilliant start to the season. Lose against Zebre first up, and then, lose against Munster by a point. But again, I feel like, it's weird to say other than getting 4 yellow cards, but other than getting 4 yellow cards in that game, they outplayed Munster in every single facet and couldn't get it done. And that's kind of, I think for Edinburgh fans, they would say that's Edinburgh. That's just the way they are. Next then, beat Benetton by 43 points, and then lose to Cardiff by a point. And again, it's that up and down performance, and come back then with a 2-point win against Ospreys. And then in the Champions Cup, again, kind of, weird from them, because they start out really well, get themselves that win first up against Toulon, and you're thinking, okay, Edinburgh, going to be serious now. Like, that first round, we have both of the Scottish teams winning in the Champions Cup, and it's looking brilliant for Scottish rugby. And then for the second one, then they send, they send like a weakened side over to Castra, and they get absolutely hockeyed. And you're thinking, like, why did you do that? Because it's not like Edinburgh are in the competition every single year, and it's not like their first team players couldn't use the kind of experience of going away to France in this competition and putting, not necessarily winning, just putting in the performance and maybe almost winning. Like, it feels like, it's not like, again, it's not like they're year on year in this competition and they're seasoned veterans who've been there, done that, in terms of for Edinburgh in this competition I'm talking about. Obviously, they've done it for Scotland, but still, you'd feel like, send over your best team, give it a go over there, and maybe put yourselves in position to be on the cusp of qualifying. Now they're bottom of their pool, albeit like there's 1 point between first and last in the pool, but still you're in that scramble now to qualify. Whereas if you'd taken that game a little bit more seriously, you could be, have that little bit extra over a lot of the other teams in the pool, and they did do that. So, coming into this one, I talked about for the Italian derby that it's getting like this Scottish derby, in that, you feel like probably the home team is going to win the game, but I feel like Glasgow over the 2 games will win on aggregate. So I'm going to say that Glasgow are going to win this one, and by a bigger margin than if Edinburgh win, the return game. So I'm expecting Glasgow maybe to be, a score, more than a score ahead. I don't think Edinburgh are going to get a losing bonus point out of this one. So my prediction, Glasgow win. And again, apologies for missing them out on this, and I only just noticed it now. And I'm on my break from work, trying to get this done as quickly as possible. But yeah, for now, back to the rest of the video. Next one then we have is the other South African derby. So Hollywood Sharks versus the Vodacom Bulls. And, two teams who haven't really been on it this season, if we're honest. We look at, how they started the season so far. So the Sharks, lost against Glasgow, then that draw against the Dragons in, the Storm, then they lose against Leinster, lose against Ulster, they get the first win of the season against the Scarlets, and then they lose against Connacht after that, and 27 points lost to Connacht. Bulls started the season well, but then still, even in the games that they won, there was a bit of a question mark about the defence. So start up with a win against Ospreys, and then Leinster after that as well. But then they lose to Ulster, lose to Connacht. They beat Connacht by a point, so that was decent, going away from home and getting that after, especially on the back of that, Ulster defeat, whereas 28 points to 7. Then they lose against Glasgow, which was kind of a clash between, two teams who were on the cusp of kind of the top 3 or 4, and you felt like the winner was going to get the momentum. Glasgow won, but it didn't quite work out for them momentum-wise. And then they lose against the Lions as well at home, which, would have stung a bit there, I would say. And then they go into the Champions Cup, and, for me, they produced like one good 40 minutes over the 2 games. The starting, the first half against Bordeaux was really good. Having come from behind and leading 33 points to 22 at half time, then they get nilled in the second half, and they lose the game 46-33, and then they just send a weakened team to their second game and get hockeyed in that. So not a brilliant European window for them, and they'd be looking to maybe get back on track in this one. But going up against the Sharks, who themselves, their kind of European window wasn't brilliant either. But at the same time, at least, for them, they do have one win out of that, 1 win and 1 loss. At the moment, they're outside of the playoff spots, but you feel like if they can get another win, maybe they're into knockout stages, and they've got, not as much to do as the Bulls in regards to that. And now, like, they've got home advantage in this one. And yeah, this is a difficult one to pick, but I'm going to say, that just because it's a South African, derby, the Sharks get up for it. I wish they get up for more URC games, but I think they'll get up for this one and they'll take the win there. Okay, on to the next game then, and that is Ospreys versus Munster. So the last 2 games now are not derbies. Every single other one was a derby. These are just Wales versus Ireland, both the games. This one is a 5:30 kickoff and is at Dunraven Brewery Field. And, Ospreys, not a brilliant start to the season for them either. Like, sitting in 13th place in the league, Munster up in 3rd, and, started off defeat against the Bulls and Stormers, but they showed a bit of grit in those games and actually put, because Leinster played the same teams, and they just kind of swapped one week to the other, and the Ospreys generally looked more competitive than Leinster did against those teams. And then it looked like they were going to have a decent run, because they come back, good win against Zebre to start, and you think, yeah, it's a bit of momentum for them, but then they lose, quite heavily to Glasgow, and then they get that draw, against the Dragons as well, when you thought, at least get your second win on the board, but they couldn't do that. And then, a narrow loss against Edinburgh before the international break, and then the European games. And then, from there, they go into Europe and they actually have a really good run. They go 2 from 2. They get themselves 2 bonus point wins, 9 tries across the 2 games, and it's suddenly looking good. Like they're in a bit of form. And then you look at Munster. Munster, brilliant start to the season. Win 5 in the bounce. They beat Scarlets, Cardiff, Edinburgh. Then that real peak against Leinster. Beat Connacht in a close game and then lose the head-to-head at the top of the table against the Stormers. They go into Europe then, and Bath just absolutely blow them away in the first kind of 15, 20 minutes of that game, and there's no way back for them. But then they go to Páirc Uí Chaoimh and they blow away a Gloucester team there to kind of put themselves back in the hunt for the knockout stages. So Ospreys certainly had the better European adventure in terms of getting 2 wins from 2, but Munster not too bad themselves. As long as you take that start, which will haunt them, that start against Bath out of the equation, I think they recovered pretty well in their second game. But now they're going to Ospreys. Ospreys looking to kind of detach themselves from that fight at the bottom of the table and get more into kind of the, towards the playoff places, whereas Munster want to stay in that top 3. And, probably a good chance for them as well with, Ulster and Leinster playing each other to put a bit more daylight between themselves, and at least one of those two with a win in this one. I think Munster will have just enough, I think, to win it, but I expect Ospreys to get some kind of points out of the game as well. Okay, now on to the final game of the weekend, and it is a 7:45 kickoff of Dragons versus Connacht. It's at Rodney Parade, and we got Dragons at the moment in 15th place and Connacht on 9th. So Connacht are just outside of the playoff places. They would love to get a win here because it probably would, as long as one team above them slips up, they will move up into those playoff places, whether it's temporary or not. You'd have to see after that. But gonna be, but I feel like it's gonna be close because, you have Lancaster there now in Connacht. He's obviously trying to get them to be more consistent, but, the Connacht, it's very hard to change that. You can't just come in, what has he had now, a third of a season so far, and change something like that. A team that have been so erratic for so long as well. But you can see that there are some changes coming there, but it is going to take time. Like it's taken Richie Murphy, 2 seasons now at Ulster, and now we're only kind of seeing the results of all his work there as well. So it's going to be an interesting one. I think, you got Dragons who, no wins so far in the URC this season. They lose to Ulster first up, then they get that draw against the Sharks. They lose to Glasgow and Cardiff, but then they do get another draw against Ospreys, and then that loss against Leinster. Again, when a different interpretation, at a certain time, and they could have got themselves potentially a draw or a third draw of the season, or maybe even be looking for the win in the closing minutes of that game. Then they go into Europe and finally they get themselves their first win of the season. So at the minute, they're 1 win, 1 loss in their pool, and they're sitting in 4th place as well. So they could get themselves some knockout rugby if they can kind of mirror that in January in the second round, or the second lot, should I say, of the pool games. So, a little bit more confidence, I would say, in the squad. They have, a Connacht team coming who, started well, beat Benetton, but then they had a run of defeats, lost to Cardiff, to the Bulls narrowly, and then to Munster narrowly as well. And there's so many in recent years, Connacht performances where they've come close to beating Munster and can't quite get it done. Like, it must be very frustrating for them. But then they bounce back with a 27-point defeat of the Hollywood Bet Sharks. And then they go into the, Challenge Cup, generally where you expect, Connacht to, generally they're doing really well in the pool stages, and then they go into knockout stages, and their inconsistency kind of costs them, because eventually, normally in maybe a quarter final, there is a poor performance that you're just expecting, and they're knocked out. In this one so far, 1 win, 1 loss, but they did get a bonus point in that loss as well. So sitting on 6 points, 3rd place in their pool, but they would, want to be kind of putting pressure on Montpellier and Ospreys above them in that pool. So would be hoping to win their last 2 games. And you feel like, this game here, it's a good game for them to get, some momentum as well domestically, and also to take into those European games in January. And, again, I think it's going to be a tight one here. I think the Dragons get something out of the game. They might even get a 3rd draw of the season, but I always say I'm not going to predict draws, so I'm going to go for Connacht to just about edge that one.